Good afternoon, everyone. I cordially welcome you all for the inaugural lecture of the short course on cultural linkages towards an Asian ideology. Today, we're focusing on regional integration and economic cooperation in Asia. The agenda for today is such that the lecture is scheduled to be for 45 minutes with a short break of 5 minutes, followed by another 30 minutes of the lecture and a question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now have the honor of introducing our guest lecturer, Senior Professor Anoma Abayarathna. Professor Abayarathna is a Senior Professor in Economics at the Department of Economics and Statistics of the University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. Our esteemed guest holds a PhD in Economics from the University of Essex, UK, an MA in Econometrics from the University of Essex, an MPhil in Agricultural Economics from the University of Peradeniya, and a BA with Honours in Economics also from the University of Peradeniya. Professor Abayarathna has many years of experience in university-level teaching and research. She has held positions such as the Dean of the Faculty of Arts of the University of Peradeniya, Visiting Professor at the University of Rouen in France, Visiting Professor at the University of Brasov in Romania, and Visiting Professor at the South Asia University in Asia, as well as Visiting Research Fellow at the University of Essex in the UK and at the University of Malaya in Malaysia. Madam, we are profoundly honored to have you with us here, and we warmly welcome you to deliver this lecture on regional cooperation and economic development in Asia. Thank you.
Hope you all hear me well.
Yes, madam, we can hear you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me to deliver this lecture. I'll start with the outline of my presentation. First, I will do an introduction to Asian economies, followed by an introduction to economic integration in Asia. Then we look at why it is important, integration for Asia is important, then the challenges, then I summarize my presentation with conclusions. Before we start, we look at Asia. As we all know, there are 51 countries in Asia, and there are 6 sub-regions. Asia accounts for 62.4% of world population. The region with the highest percentage of population. Out of that, China accounts for 18% and India 17%. As a sub-region, South Asia is the home for 1/5 of world population. East Asia accounts for 21%, while Southeast Asia accounts for 8%. Based on income, GDP per capita in dollars, we can categorize Asian countries into 4 groups. High-income countries like Bahrain, Brunei, Cyprus, Hong Kong, China, Japan, and upper middle-income countries like Armenia, Azerbaijan, China, Georgia, Russian Federation, Thailand, and middle-income countries where Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, Pakistan, Philippines, and India, Sri Lanka. You can see that 3 South Asian countries are in middle income category. Lower income countries are Afghanistan, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Nepal, Republic of Syrian Arab, Tajikistan, Republic of Yemen. This is the World Bank classification of income categories of countries. I'm not going to read it. I share my slides with you. I have included it for your information. From the data I provided, you can see that there is a considerable living standard and well-being in terms of Human Development Index. Human Development Index is a composite index of health, education, and standard of living. Health is measured as life expectancy, education, mean years of schooling, and standard of living by gross national income per capita. So from the previous slide, we can see that only 11 low and middle income economies show growth rates below 4%. So all the other countries are having above 4 growth rates. And these countries account for 38.8% of global exports and imports. This is South Asia, consists of 8 countries. Now we look at South Asia. We can say that South Asia is one of the most dynamic regions in the world now. It is home to 1/5 of world population, 1.4 billion people. South Asia is rich in human resources and sophisticated skills. Scientific and technological accomplishments are world-class. Over the past decade, India and other countries in South Asia have experienced impressive growth rates. Nowadays, you know that Bangladesh and Pakistan are experiencing high growth rates, and India is becoming a global center for IT. The region has signed a number of agreements, including SAPTAS, CEFTA, and other bilateral agreements with regional members. So with all the good things I said about the region, unfortunately, South Asia is the poorest region in the world. It ranks very low in terms of human well-being. Poor nutrition is the major cause of this. About 540 million people, that is like nearly half of the region's population, live in poverty. Here, I'm talking about poverty measured as $1 a day. People who earn less than $1 a day are considered poor. But we know that $1 is, in Sri Lankan rupees now, it is little above 200. That is a very low measure. This percentage is higher than Sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, Middle East, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Pacific region. If we compare with other countries in the developed world, second column shows the GDP per capita, that is GDP of the country, total income of the country divided by mid-population. When compared to $59,500 in US and nearly $43,000 in Japan, per capita income of India is $1,980. And Nepal is only 900. Sri Lanka, 4,000. Next column shows us the number of years that we expect a person to live at birth. Highest in Japan, 84.5. Among the countries, you can see that Sri Lanka has the highest life expectancy in South Asian countries, close to that in US. Last column is mean years of schooling. It is also highest in US, and Sri Lanka is an exceptional cause. Being a lower middle income country, it has a higher mean years of schooling. With all that, we have new hopes. South Asia is growing fast, has begun to grow fast, while all the other countries in the world is facing economic downturn. Number of countries in South Asia has showing a new growth momentum. The region is now the fastest growing in the world. World Bank predicts that South Asia may be able to extend its growth lead over East Asia and the Pacific regions. All countries in South Asia now have opened to the outside world. GDP in South Asian countries have grown strongly since 1990 and almost 7% during 2004 to 9. These high growth rates are directly attributable to the opening up of the economies, among other factors. Before 19th, almost all the South Asian countries had closed economic policies. It was in 1977 that Sri Lanka adopted open economic policies. India adopted open economic policies much later than that. Trade and investment reforms implemented since 80s and 90s have increased in the region's level of global integration. That is, trade and foreign direct investment have grown consistently since then. Since opening up, trade dependence ratio of all South Asian countries have increased and shown an increase in trend over the years. And all South Asian countries have shown high growth of exports and imports. Free trade, by free trade, I mean trade without any barriers. That is when governments of the economies do not attempt to influence through quotas or trade import-export taxes. We call them duties. What its citizens can buy from another country or what they can produce and sell to another country. These benefits of free trade allows country to specialize in manufacturing goods that they can produce most efficiently within the country. This pattern of international trade, we can easily understand it. Saudi Arabia, they produce and export oil. Mexico, they are labor abundant countries. They produce labor intensive goods and export to other countries. But it is not easy to understand why Japan is producing cars and exporting them. We know that Japan is a small country and they do not have much natural resources. They do not have raw materials to produce cars, but they have very good in the technology in producing cars. So it is not only the ownership of natural resources that cause international trade. I briefly go through theory of international trade. First theory was the theory of absolute advantage introduced by Adam Smith in his book of Wealth of Nations in 1776. It says that trade is beneficial when a country produces more of a product with the same amount of input than another country. If we can produce a car with less amount of labor compared to another country, or less amount of raw material compared to other country, we should produce it and export it to the other country. That means you should produce goods where you are most efficient. Trade for those where you are not efficient. Import the goods that you are not efficient in producing. Then trade between countries is beneficial. The second theory is theory of comparative advantage, introduced by the economist David Ricardo in 1870. According to him, trade is mutually beneficial even if one country is more efficient than other. The principle of comparative advantage is each nation should specialize in production of those goods for which it is relatively more efficient, with not the absolute efficiency, relatively more efficient with the low opportunity cost. So it is not possible for one country to have a comparative advantage in everything. After that, there were many trade theories. I only mentioned them here. Heckscholine theory. Here. In 19th, there were new theories, new theory of international values there were a number of economists introduced those new theories. Now we look at economic integration in Asia. What is regional integration? It is a process in which neighboring states enter into an agreement in order to upgrade cooperation through common institutions and rules. There are many examples like EU, European Union, ASEAN, and NAFTA. People can benefit from regional integration through economic growth, economies of scale, and standard of living. European Union, you know that it is the group of European countries forming a group. Within that group, they can trade with each other without any barriers. Now they have gone in another step and use a common currency. So they benefit a lot from this cooperation. It helps nations to achieve economic growth, economies of scale, and increase their standard of living. Here I have given an example to explain theory of comparative advantage. I don't know whether I would have enough time to explain all that, but I wanted to add these slides so you can read them later and understand. I mentioned that regional integration allows economies of scale. Students who study economics, they know that when firms produce in large scale, what I have drawn is a long run cost curve, average cost curve. As firms producing in larger scale, they experience economies of scale. That means they can produce with a lower average cost. When you produce in larger scale, firms can produce with lower average cost. So they can compete with others with this lower cost. Standard of living refers to level of wealth, comfort, material goods and necessities available to a certain socioeconomic class in a certain geographic area. It could be a country or region. So the baseline measure is GDP per capita, but there are other measures that used to measure standard of living. When consumers have access to cheaper imports, wider choice of products, and higher quality output, when they enter into trade with other countries, it can increase their standard of living. What is regional economic integration? Basically, it is free flow of trade in goods and services, investment, capital and financial flows, and movement of people. So you can see that it is not only trading goods and services. Countries, investors from one country can invest in another country. They can buy shares in other firms in other countries. Also, movement of people. We have the experience of Sri Lankans going to Middle East to work and sending their earnings back. So in regional integration, if people are allowed to freely move among countries within that block, people can go and work in where jobs are available, where wages are higher. That will help improve in their living standards. That's why countries get together and enter into agreements. By doing that, they expect to reduce and ultimately remove tariff and non-tariff barriers to the free flow of goods, services, and factors of production among each other. These are levels of integration. Countries can allow free imports and exports between a region and custom unions. Next step is common market, economic union, and political union. Free trade area is the lowest level of integration and the highest is political union. You can see the difference between them. Free trade area is a region where a group of countries have signed free trade agreement and maintain little or no barriers to trade in the form of tariff or quotas between each other. You know that we have agreed a free trade agreement. We have signed a free trade agreement between India and Sri Lanka. Under that free trade agreement, we can export and import certain goods without export or import taxes. The government wanted to go further and come into agreement for services to move freely, but there was a resistance from the country, and I think it is not working now. Customs union, it is a type of trade bloc which is composed of free trade area with a common external tariff. So there is no tariff among the members of the custom union, but others outside the union have to pay the tariff. Common market is another one. In that block, most trade barriers have been removed. Adopt common external trade barriers and allow free movement of resources like labor among member countries. An economic union like European Union is a type of trade bloc which is composed of a common market with the customs union. Political union is a type of state which is composed of or created out of smaller states. Now we look at what are the economic reasons for regional integration. First, it is expected to stimulate economic growth in those countries. But there are concerns among policymakers that trade and openness are the key drivers of development. And it allows countries to specialize in those goods and services efficiently produced. Easier to gain agreement than GATT and WTO. With this agreement, integration role of foreign direct investment is enhanced. Exploit gains from free flow of goods and services and investment. There are some political reasons also. Economic interdependence creates incentives for political cooperation and reduces potential for violent confrontation. Together, the countries have economic clout to enhance trade with other countries or trade within blocs. This shows the change in economic integration in Asia. Trade in 2001, it was 53% regional trade. It has increased to 58% in 2018. Foreign direct investment has increased from 41% to 48%. Equity from 12% to 18%. Debt 8% to 17%. And tourist arrivals 75% to 80%. So we can see that economic integration in Asia is increasing. It is growing. Regional economic integration in Asia is mainly based on trade in goods and services than any other form of economic integration. If we look at foreign direct investment data in India, India's investment in other countries have increased largely. But if we look at the share of FDI within South Asia, we can see that it has not increased much. It's another story why India wanted to invest more in outside the region than in the region. Trade in goods is easier to measure, but it can assist in gaining an understanding of the nature of Asian economic integration more broadly and how it might differ from patterns in the rest of the world. Because all the exports and imports are recorded and we can access those data easily. So it is exports within the region is 56.55% of the region's total exports, and imports within the region accounted for 62% of the region's total imports. You can see it in this graph. It has not increased much, but here I'm talking about percentages. In volume, export and import volume has increased over the years. Here we are looking at only the percentage of it. If we compare with other regions, we can see that integration with other regions, especially with EU, is above the interregional integration. It is argued that regional economic integration has been a powerful tool in rapid growth in countries in the Asia-Pacific region like Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia. The South Asian region has lagged in harnessing its potential. Why? South Asia could not reap benefits of the regional integration. South Asia is the least integrated in the region, with intra-regional trade accounting only for 6% of total trade in 2015. So, which is very low in comparison to 27% in ASEAN. We know that trade, exports and imports of South Asian countries have increased, but not within the region, with the outside world. So this inability to harness the opportunities of cooperation in South Asia is partly due to the trade barriers, infrastructural deficits, and chronic political differences. South Asian countries have much to gain from sharing resources and knowledge and deepening economic integration. These are some details about South Asian regional cooperation. Number one is SAARC. There are 8 members. Later, under SAARC, SEFTA was introduced, South Asian Free Trade Agreement in 2006, and SEFTA, which is a commitment towards top-down reduction of tariff. But we know that none of these agreements were successful. Then another one is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal initiative. Key feature of that is that around 49% of the SAARC intra-region trade is BPI and intra-region trade. There were some other initiatives, BBI and MBA and the deal. I have given the overview in the right-hand side. I'm not going to go through all these details. And the initiative of Bay of Bengal, it is a multi-sectoral technical and economic cooperation. We call it BIMSTEC. It includes 7 members. And it seems to be doing well. South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation, it was introduced in 2001 with 6 members. SEFTA was signed in 2004 with the vision of implementing a borderless economic zone, that is without any trade barriers, and eliminate tariff on traded goods between 2006 and 2016. It was not successful. It was inter-regional trade in South Asia is less than 1/3 of its potential. Trade barriers, including high trade cost, as well as the lack of capacity to supply goods being demanded by neighboring countries, have contributed to unexploited trade potential in the sub-region. Next, we look at patterns of trade in South Asia. Trade in South Asia has grown faster than GDP during period of 2000 to 2015, with an increase in the trade to GDP ratio from 29% to 50.6. You can see the large increase in it. It emerged as one of the key drivers of growth in the sub-region. South Asia has recorded the fastest increase in exports to GDP ratio among developing regions since 90. as imports have grown faster than exports for all South Asian countries, that resulted the trade deficit or trade deficits existed were widened. Trade in services has grown even faster than its trade in goods, reflecting a transformation in the service industry. South Asia's share of service exports globally has increased from 2.8 to 4.7 within 11 years. This shows the pattern of trade in South Asia. You can see that both imports and exports have grown. This is a summary of free trade agreements in Asia. There were 4 discontinued, signed and in effect 167, that's a lot. But there are 13 that signed but not in effect. This data I'm not going to explain. I'll leave them. It is easy to understand. Next, we talk about the importance of integration for Asia. What are the benefits of regional integration? Number 1 is economic growth and decreases in poverty. It acts as a buffer against the spillover effects of the rising global trade tensions. Problems in global integration are it causes widening income inequality. High income countries take more advantage. Spillover effects cascade into a broader set of economies, especially through production sharing networks. One of the benefits of regional integration is trade creation. So that will happen when there is a reduction in tariff barriers. It will lead to lower prices and it will increase trade between countries. In South Asia, all the countries produce similar goods and export and import similar goods. So there are problems in trade creation, but increased access to wide export markets and preferential tariffs will encourage imports of intermediate goods. These 2 graphs shows the trade volumes and real GDP in Asia and world. Comparing these 2, we can see that during the economic downturn, in global economic downturn, growth of Asia is not negative, while the world experienced negative economic growth. But the patterns are similar. Now we'll look at trade dependence in Asia. For 17 Asian countries, trade to GDP ratio is more than 100% and less than 50% for only 10 Asian countries. Exports to GDP ratio is 24 Asian countries is more than 50%. Imports to GDP ratio in 23 Asian countries is more than 50%. 23 Asian countries recorded trade surplus in 2018. 21 Asian countries recorded trade deficit in the same period. So this shows the imports and exports of percentages in 2018, percentage of GDP in 2018. Next, we talk about global and regional value chains. Global value chains, that is exports that go through 2 or more economies for further production. In today's world, production of most of the goods go through more than one production process in different countries. We call it global value chains. And global value chain participation rate, that is the share of gross exports that involves production in at least 2 countries using cross-border production networks. That was 68.1% in 2018. Regional value chain participation rate, that is share of gross exports that involves production in at least 2 countries in the same region using cross-border production networks. That rate increased to 48.9% in 2018 from 47.8% in 2015. Why these global value chains are important? Because they make it possible for firms in developing countries to participate in producing the most complex and sophisticated products by specializing in a piece of the production process for which those firms have a comparative advantage and produce at the necessary large scale to be competitive globally. Now there are factories in India producing world-class products. Mercedes-Benz type cars, BMW. They produce, for some products, those reputed firms have some part of their production process in developing countries. India is benefiting a lot from that. So lead firms perform a higher value-added activities such as design, branding, and retail, but outsource all of the manufacturing to a global network of producers. They do it in places where labor is available and wages are low and taxes are low. Those subsidiaries gain through the knowledge and support provided by the lead firm and competitive pressure they put on all firms in the industry. To be competitive, the local companies, producers have to produce with the highest quality. And these leading firms will help them to find markets. Since the product is owned by those leading firms, there is no problem in finding markets. Foreign subsidiaries play a particularly important role in complex capital and knowledge incentive activities. For example, car assembly by Maruti Suzuki in India and Hyundai in Pakistan, and electronics such as Samsung in India and Toslanka, a subsidiary of Toslek from Japan in Sri Lanka. Those are good examples. This relationship leads to higher productivity and producing goods that meet world market specifications with regard to technological content, quality, and design. Without the help of that leading firm, their reputation, their brand name, the Asian countries, which are developing countries, would not be able to produce those goods and find the market for them. So these global value chains are very, very good for those countries. Primary sector, including agriculture, along with mining and quarrying, reports the highest regional value chain participation rate and highest global value chain participation rate in like 92% in 2018. a slow rise in the region's trade linkages in medium and high technology and business services. This shows the regional and global value chain intensity in Asia, EU, and North America. You can see that in Asia it is low, but it's slowly rising. In EU it's higher, fluctuating, but in North America, North America it's rising. In EU, it is decreasing. Now, what are the challenges for regional integration? If we can benefit from regional integration, why we are not doing? What are the challenges? One is groups within countries may be hurt. It might not lead to benefits for all economies or for everyone in an economy equally. Why people are against when Sri Lanka tries to sign trade agreements with India or Singapore? Potential loss of sovereignty and control over domestic issues. There is a debate. Is integration is trade creation or is it divert trade? Trade diverse mean it take trade from one place to another place where trade could have happened more efficiently. Whether it is diverting trade from more efficient country to a less efficient place. Another challenge is persistent global trade tensions. US-China trade war since 2018, then COVID. Now global demand is weakening. It can affect business confidence and it can weaken investment globally. ADB predicts that in 2018, Asia's trade grew by 4%, slower than 7% growth in 2017. And trade growth is expected to decelerate further. Rise of anti-globalization, anti-immigration and strong nationalistic sentiments like Brexit, US election, and we know that even in Sri Lankan election, it was a key thing, stemmed from the perception that globalization and trade agreements have led to the loss of jobs, stagnating incomes, and increased inequality. If we take Asian countries, especially South Asian countries, we export similar goods. So it prevents us from exporting our goods to other countries in South Asia. And trade diversion, it can divert trade away from efficient non-members to inefficient members. That means we will have to pay more for imports or we will receive less from our exports. Reduces welfare and imposes limits on multilateral trade liberalization. Another was poorly designed foreign free trade agreements based on political agenda. We know that, especially in Asia, many of the things are based on political agenda. So another challenge is open regionalism. Asian free trade agreements and other arrangements for trade liberalization have been more open to trading partners outside Asia. An inability to countries to conclude binding formal arrangements that favor regional partners. And trade barriers. EU, Brazil, South Africa, and Turkey are the main countries that have taken such measures against Asian countries such as China, South Korea, and Taiwan. They have imposed trade barriers against them. Within the region, India, Thailand, and Indonesia have imposed trade barriers on the exports of basic metals and fabricated metal products against the regional members. Some more, the new normal, digital technology and e-commerce platforms that bypass normal trade channels, internet which allows for further outsourcing, automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, replacement of unskilled labor with machines. High level of informal border trade, shared history, culture, languages, and proximity. So we know that there is a high level of informal trade in the border that happens. High cost of interregional trade. It makes trading with neighboring nations more expensive or less competitive compared to trading with distant partners. Poor supply capabilities in less developed countries. Poor trade facilitation at the borders. Sometimes the traders have to face long delays, high cost, and uncertainties from inconsistent and complex border crossing procedures and documentation. Documentation can take very long time and unnecessary regulations. Active participation in those global value chains requires lower trade cost, infrastructure development, improved market access through regional trade agreements, and the mutual recognition of standards. South Asia has developed a number of initiatives in recent decades to facilitate trade, but require to deepen and consolidate current arrangements to strengthen South Asian participation in global markets. These pictures, I added them. By looking at them, it tells a story. With these, we have modern highways, but at the same time, roads like that, vehicles like that. So are we ready to compete with other countries of the world? Can we have a successful regional or global integration? It is a long way to go. What are the measures to be taken? Sensitivities need to be phased out in an expedited manner. Tariff elimination and reduction of trade cost by achievable targets. Strengthening facilitation of transport and trade at the land borders. Effective liberalization of regional trade in service. Investment promotion to foster regional value chains. Harmonizing product standards and conformity assessment procedures. Transport connectivity is very important for countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, where they can transport goods by road. If our roads and vehicles are the ones like the ones we saw in those photos, how can we improve them? How much improvement is needed? Besides the direct impact of trade and economic growth, it would have several unintended benefits, such as opening up possibilities for production networks and value chains, enhancing the competitiveness of final products from the region on world markets. While transport infrastructure and services have been improving in all South Asian countries at varying paces, cross-border transport facilities still has much room for progress. If trade costs in South Asia can be brought down to the levels enjoyed by ASEAN countries, interregional trade could increase by nearly 11%, more than 3 times what would accrue from the elimination of tariffs. Energy constraints, it is another one. I'm not going to go through it. I'll leave you to read it from the slide. ICT and people-to-people connectivity. It has the potential to provide new solutions to diverse development challenges faced by the sub-region by improving services in areas of sectors such as health, education, and business development. Internet access in South Asia is constantly expanding. Now, millions of people are online on a regular basis. COVID-19 has forced us to expedite it, expand it, and use it. Progress has been uneven, with disparities creating gaps in education, career opportunities, and other benefits of the digital age. However, there is a major obstacle to ICT connectivity. It is the poor quality of cross-border IT and telecommunication infrastructure. Initiatives have been taken to increase the availability and affordability of broadband internet across the region by strengthening the underlying internet infrastructure in the region. And there are vulnerabilities shared by all the countries in the region. Number one is natural disasters like earthquakes or cyclones, landslides, killing thousands of people and causing huge economic losses. Requires great policy focus for reducing mortality risk and asset losses out of natural calamities. We need regional cooperation to face them. We know that South Asia is home to 2/3 of the world's 795 million chronically malnourished people, and creating food security and eradicating hunger are key development challenges. Greater regional cooperation can reduce food price volatility and focus production systems to bridge the gaps between supply and demand. We have achieved some of them. After tsunami, there were systems established, disaster and climate preparedness supported by regional integrated multi-hazard early warning systems. However, this needs further strengthening. So what is the way forward for Asia? We need to move forward as a region to make the best use of opportunities to overcome these challenges. For South Asia, this can be best realized by exploiting the immense potential for regional integration and its subsequent trade, investment, and growth opportunities. Promoting greater regionalism is crucial in addressing challenges, as this creates opportunities to harness the spillover benefits of India's growth success. Regional trade agreements are more viable as economies are on a level playing field and are more likely to have economic complementarity, already evident in South Asia, especially in services trade. Given its economic power, India will have to take on a disproportionately larger responsibility for promoting regional cooperation in South Asia. Yet, regional integration will not be achieved by India's unilateral actions alone. other countries will have to respond positively to Indian initiatives for successful regional integration. But we know that we look at India with suspicion. And the clashes between India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. So there is a lot more to achieve. I have presented a summary too, and some more tables with data for your reference. Okay. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, madam. So students, you can ask any questions you have now from madam.
Professor Anoma,
Yes.
thank you very much for the informative presentation. It was very informative, and we learned a lot from that. I just have a follow-up question.
Okay.
You mentioned that the trading cost within the South Asian region countries is much higher compared to the trading cost for those countries with other developed countries. Why is the trading cost that high, and what can be done to bring down the costs?
Mainly between India and other countries where they can use, do the transport by road. Their roads are not very good, and their method of transport, vehicles. So if they can have a very good network of roads, they can reduce their transport cost largely. Did I answer to your question?
Thank you. So basically, there are internal roads, and as well as from transporting from one country to another, those countries are high.
Yes. At one point, I mentioned that if they can improve that, there is no need to remove tariff. Even without removing tariff, they can reduce cost by 11%, even with tariff.
Thank you.
Madam, so there's a bit of conversation in Sri Lanka, right, that trade data should be like opened up, like the customs and like the EDB, for example. So, and that it will benefit the traders. But like, I'm assuming that there is a certain cost that will go into that. Like, how do you think that cost and those benefits will like balance each other off?
Since all these cost data are not available, it is not possible to calculate the cost and benefits, no? We can't see the whole picture.
Right. So, madam,
is that what you meant?
No, madam, like, so there is a lot of data, right, that they sell at a cost. Like, you can buy from the customs, but whereas like other countries give them for free, in Sri Lanka, like exporters have to go and buy them. So if they like have it freely available, that would be like action income, right?
I don't think compared to the cost of trade, that cannot be very significant, no, the cost of data.
Okay, madam.
So I don't think it would make much impact on cost of trade. Right. It is good if they can be freely available and easily accessible.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you, madam.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the students of the short course on cultural linkages towards an Asian ideology. First, I would like to thank our lecturer, Senior Professor Anoma Abayarathna, for sharing her time and knowledge with us and for delivering this inaugural lecture amidst her busy schedule. Madam, your address set the tone for this course by clearly indicating the role of regional cooperation and economic development in Asia. We are blessed to have you contribute to this course. Next, I wish to thank Dr. Hemantha Premaratne and all other staff and personnel of KDU who have brought these lectures together. Thank you. Last but not least, I thank all participants from our university for joining us today. Your participation has made this lecture a successful event, and I believe it has provided you with an insight into the economics of Asia. To conclude, let me once more express my gratitude to Senior Professor Anoma Abayarathna for delivering today's lecture. Madam, it is an honor to have you with us, and your time and efforts are deeply appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much.